I'm Paige. Welcome back to my kitchen. You're watching the next episode of Doughin' It with Paigey. Today we will be making the Cinnamon Raisin Swirl Brioche from the cookbook Bread Baking for Beginners by Bonnie Ohara. Now this is going to be a loaf style bread, and it'll have a really pretty cinnamon swirl design when you cut into it. I'm not a huge fan of raisins, so I'm actually going to be using dried cranberries today, so feel free to use whatever dried fruit you'd like. Now if you've watched my other enriched bread videos from this book, you'll know that I've been using half and half instead of milk in my brioche. I think that it just makes a softer, better bread. If you don't want to use half and half, obviously whole milk will work fine. With all that being said, let's go ahead and start weighing out our ingredients. In separate bowls, we'll start out by weighing out our all-purpose flour, salt, yeast, and eggs. Now, weighing out your eggs can be kind of tricky. I usually like to crack them into a bowl on my scale and pour out any excess into a separate bowl until I get them down to the weight that I need. Any excess egg will be used for my egg wash later. In a separate bowl, I'm going to go ahead and weigh out my dried cranberries that we'll be incorporating later. In a large bowl, I'll weigh out my very soft room temperature butter, and I usually like to set my butter out on the counter the night before I bake to ensure that it's very soft. I'll then add in my sugar and half and half. We'll pour the egg directly on top of this mixture and the yeast right on top of that. And we'll just whisk this up until it's nice and smooth. Now I know the consistency may still be a little bit chunky as you're mixing this. Just try to get it as smooth as you can. Now that this mixture is nice and smooth, we're going to go ahead and add our flour on top of this and the salt on top of the flour. And you'll just want to jump right in and start mixing by hand. Now you'll just want to start squeezing the dough, start scraping all of the ingredients off of the sides of the bowl, and really try to incorporate everything the best that you can. You want to aim to get this as smooth and evenly dispersed as possible. You don't really want any dry lumps inside of your dough. Your goal here is to get your dough really stretchy like this. When we're done mixing, we're going to go ahead and let this rest for about 30 minutes so that the flour can absorb some of these wetter ingredients. So the book doesn't really tell you when to add in your raisins. Now I have seen several people try this recipe, and I've seen them add them in at different times. Some people add them in during the initial mix, some people add them in before they knead, and some people add them in after they knead. Now, I have tried all methods and all of them work just fine. I do think it is a little bit awkward to knead with raisins in your dough, so I think I'm going to be adding them in when our dough is almost done being kneaded, and I'll sort of fold those in like we did in the country walnut and raisin loaf. Now that our dough is done resting, we're going to go ahead and start kneading it. We're going to start off by turning our dough out of the bowl onto a floured countertop. Now I like to keep a small bowl of flour with my dough just so I can easily access that while I'm kneading. I also keep my dough scraper nearby just in case my dough gets really sticky. So I'm going to add a little bit of flour to my dough. And you guys know the drill. To knead, all we do is push forward with the heel of our hand, pull the dough back, give it a quarter turn, and do the same thing. So that's push forward, pull back, quarter turn. Forward, back, turn. And as you get familiar with that process, I've learned to kind of speed that up a little bit. So I just kind of make it all one motion. We're just going to knead this for about 5 to 10 minutes until the dough has tightened up. Tell our dough has started to really tighten up here. It's kind of staying in one piece. It's not really getting super stuck to the counter anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and fold in my dried cranberries. Now I'm not going to add any flour to this because it makes my dough less sticky, and I kind of want that sticky dough to fold in the raisins. So I added a little bit of water to my hands just to keep these raisins from getting too sticky. And I'm just going to add probably about half of this on the top of the dough right here. Just kind of press this out, and I'm going to give it a couple letter folds. Press it all out again. I'm just going to try to work these raisins in until they're pretty much evenly dispersed. Now don't be worried if these are popping out like crazy, just pop them back into the dough and just continue to work with it. Here I'm kind of doing just a kneading motion to get these all mixed into the dough. Turn this over, press everything out, do a couple more sets of letter folds, and just try to continue to work these in. So once we're done kneading our dough, we're gonna go ahead and pop it back into the bowl and let this rise for about 2 hours. I'm gonna cover it up with a floured kitchen towel and we'll come back and check it then. All right, it's been about 2 hours and here is what our dough looks like. When your dough is done rising, you do have the option to just go ahead and get this rolled out and shaped. I'm gonna go ahead and let mine chill though for about an hour in the fridge, just so it's a little bit more easy to manage. So we're gonna pop it in the fridge and we'll come back and check it then. While it's in the fridge though, I am going to go ahead and prepare our filling, which is a cinnamon sugar mix. We're going to start off by weighing out our sugar and cinnamon. We're just going to mix this together until it's all combined. Alright, I just took our dough out of the fridge. It's been in there for about 2 hours. We're going to go ahead and turn this out and get it shaped. Alright, I'm going to add just a little bit of flour to my countertops here. And we're gonna roll this out vertical from me, and I'm gonna use my loaf pan here as a guide. So it's gonna be long ways, and we want this about as long as our loaf pan because it's going to fit into the loaf pan that way. I'm using a wooden rolling pin today, so I do like to add a little bit of flour to that. And we're just gonna start by rolling this out. If your dough is very sticky to the rolling pin, just add a little bit of flour and continue to roll out your dough. You can see here I'm just continuing to use this loaf pan as a guide so this will fit right inside. I'm going to go all around the dough and just kind of straighten up the edges so I can get a more uniform shape out of this. Alright, so we're going to use our leftover egg that we used when we mixed the dough together, and we're just going to brush the entire loaf with this. And to make our egg wash, it's the leftover egg with just a couple tablespoons of water mixed together. Okay, now we're going to take our cinnamon sugar mixture and just sprinkle this evenly across the entire rectangle. Now we're just going to roll this up from the side facing us all the way to this side. I'm just going to go all along the bottom here and just kind of seal this seam just pinching the dough and sealing this the best that I can. Now, if you got your dough a little bit longer than your loaf pan, it's not a big deal. You're just gonna place this in your loaf pan the best that you can, and we'll tuck these corners in. We're gonna proof this for about an hour and a half to 2 hours until this starts to kind of bubble up and rise over the top of the loaf pan. All right, guys, our dough is done proofing, and it took 3.5 hours to get to this point. Now, it's not exactly bubbling over the top of the loaf pan, but it has proofed. It's leaving an indent when I poke it, so I know that it's ready to go. So now that our dough is finally done proofing, we're gonna go ahead and brush this with our egg wash and put it into the oven. We're gonna put this in the oven at 375, and I'm gonna check it around 30 minutes. If you're trying this at home, just make sure that you remove your bread from the loaf pan to cool down, just so it doesn't get really soggy and difficult to remove from the pan. I'm really excited to try this, so let's go ahead and do a taste test. The bread turned out really good. It has a very subtle sweetness, which I like. It's not overly sweet or anything like that. It just really reminds me of something that would be served at Thanksgiving or maybe around Halloween. It just really has that nice spice to it. All in all, I think you guys will really enjoy this bread. While it did take me pretty much all day to make this bread, it ended up being a success, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Before we wrap up, I just want to point out something new. It is my shirt. I had an old friend of mine, her name is Juanita, she's a fan of the show. She had someone custom design this logo for me and sent me a couple of shirts, and I just wanted to say thank you to her on the show because I love them so much. I couldn't have imagined a better logo for the show myself. I also want to thank everyone else for reaching out. I love getting comments and messages from people about the show. It just makes me so happy to talk bread with other people. So if you're watching this and you want to slide into my DMs on Instagram or leave a comment, I so appreciate the feedback on the channel. I just love you guys, and I'm just so happy with how much good vibes and positive things that everybody's had to say about the channel. Now, be sure to tune in next week because we are making a really fun recipe. It's the chocolate babka recipe. This is just a really fun bread to make, so I'm really excited to try that with you guys. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, be sure to subscribe, and thanks again for watching Doughing It with Paigey. I'll see you guys next time. I don't know what I'm talking about, but let's roll it. Great. Okay. That's all the information I have. Okay. No. Should I have said something about my Doughing It with Paigey shirt at the beginning? How do I say? That was all I needed to say, right? We're good.